Welcome everyone to the Making Ideas Work podcast again. I am absolutely thrilled to have someone who I've been following for many years, who's really a pioneer in the innovation space. But Tony Ulwick, I want to hand over to you for a proper introduction, because I was thinking earlier, how am I going to introduce Tony? Because you've done so much. You've got so many books, concepts, and all these things that I could introduce you with. But for anyone who's not familiar with you, Tony Ulwick, what do people need to know in order to get a bit of an understanding about who you are and what you do?
That's a great question. Well, I'll go way back then and give it a start. But, I started my business career as a manufacturing engineer, and I worked for IBM at the time. I have a mechanical engineering background and an MBA, and, my first attempt was just applying what I learned on my mechanical engineering degree to business. And I ended up working on a product called the PC Junior, and I was responsible for helping to set up the production line. And we spent 2 years developing this product, getting it ready for launch. And it was supposed to be IBM's big entree into the home computer market. We were going to kill Apple. We were going to take over the world. It was going to be amazing. And that amazement, we were actually amazed, because the day after it was introduced, the headlines in the Wall Street Journal read, "The PC Junior is a flop." and
The day after?
The day after.
Oh my goodness.
And it was. And it was, of course, it took us a year to come to grips with the fact that we just spent $1 billion on something that people don't want. Well, that was shocking to me. I was pretty naive in my career. I didn't know products failed. I thought, a company like IBM with all its vast resources would certainly put out something that would be a great hit, but it wasn't. And that got me very interested in innovation as a process. Just like I view manufacturing as a process, I think, well, innovation's got to be a process too. We're just trying to come up with ideas that meet customer needs. How hard can this be? And it turns out it's pretty hard.
I was going to say, and still trying to solve that challenge right now.
Yeah, exactly. And we can get into why it's hard and how to fix it. But so from there, I spent my last 6 years at IBM in a product planning role, trying to figure out better ways to innovate. And at the time, there weren't many great tools, but voice of customer was just becoming popular. Six Sigma thinking, conjoint analysis, house of quality. But I quickly realized that none of these really contributed to an end-to-end innovation process that produced consistent results. So I set out to figure out, well, why is that, and how do we fix it? And it goes back to that story, and you hit on it. The day after we introduced it, they said it was a flop. How did they know that? Right? How did they know that quick? So the thought was, they're using some set of metrics to judge how well that product would work in the market. And we're using some other set of metrics. And the thought is, if we knew what metrics people were going to use to judge the value of our product way in advance, we could just design the product to address those metrics, and the headlines would read far better. So the thought was, what are those metrics, and how can we get them well in advance? And that's what really led to outcome-driven innovation as the process.
Amazing. I mean, I'm guessing here that moment, because often we need a moment to kind of go to awaken ourselves to these big challenges, right? And that moment that you had the foresight and the I guess the reflection to realize something's clearly wrong here. We've gone through this, had this belief maybe of this is how products are built. This is IBM. Surely it's going to work here. But what I love about your story there, and kind of connecting some dots, and also relating this a little bit to my journey as well, because I also did engineering at university. I was on a path towards mechanical engineering myself, but actually switched to computer systems engineering, kind of halfway through my first year. But actually, it's a very engineering mindset that you've adopted there to something which a lot of people think as a kind of a creative process, innovation and creativity being so intertwined, but you've actually kind of adopted there an engineering mindset and a reflective process to kind of go, hey, something's wrong here, let's reverse engineer. the things and try and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And it came to me. I was working on a project for IBM back in it was like 1989. I was in Australia at the time, working for their team there, and it it occurred to me. And here's what happened. I've always read. People don't want the quarter-inch drill; they want the quarter-inch hole.
Right.
Of course. So I had read that for years. But it finally occurred to me one day that, you know what? If we study the job of the hole maker instead of study the drill, now we're studying a process. And as a manufacturing engineer, I love studying processes, right? So then I thought, well, if I can study as a process, I can break it down into steps and figure out what metrics we should measure and control to produce a predictable result, which is the way we talk in manufacturing, right? And I thought we can just apply the same principles. We can get the manufacturing job done better, or the job done better, right? It can be done faster, more predictably. That's why we have statistical process control with a great result. That's why we have Six Sigma and all those principles. It said, well, why don't we just turn everything we've learned on internal process improvement and focus it on the process the customer is trying to execute.
Right. Complete switch.
Complete switch. And
Mm.
of course, the thought was, well, are people going to know the metrics they use to measure success as they go about and execute a process? Turns out they do very well, and that's why the process has been successful. But it was that insight that caused me to rethink how the innovation process could potentially work.
Fantastic. And I really want to dig into both jobs to be done and ODI, the outcome driven innovation, and the intersection between those two as well. I think
Sure.
this is an area where I've got a bit stuck personally, if I'm honest. I've been aware of the theory of jobs, if you like, and the stories like nobody wants a quarter inch drill, they want a quarter inch hole, and then kind of figuring out from there, well, what does that really mean for me or the organization that I'm working with and whatever else. But for someone that's new to these concepts, these are quite maybe abstract terms. And I know of so many instances where people just get, particularly jobs to be done, they just get it wrong. They just don't seem to understand what it's really about. Sometimes people think it's, well, it's like the tasks that I need to get done. It's just like I need to create a task list of things that I need to do in my job. And that's, I've heard that kind of thing before. But forget about where people go wrong. I want to hear from the inventor. Where should people start? How can we understand, or how can you enable people that might be listening that might have heard about this thing but don't really know kind of how to uncouple it and really how to start to grasp what it's all about and what the power of it is? And yeah, let us know what's the best way to kind of understand jobs and maybe ODI and how those kind of processes integrate fully.
Yeah. Well, let's start with again the way I came about this. Right. It was all about focusing on the hole maker, not the drill maker. Let's see the world through what the hole maker's trying to do, and they're trying to execute a process. That's the way I thought about it back in those days. Right. They're trying to execute a process. So let's break down that process into its component parts and figure out how they measure success along each step of the way. And once we know what metrics they're using, we can potentially figure out where they're struggling in the job. We can quantify it, and then we could figure out where we need to go focus to to execute that process more effectively. That's how I thought about it for years. And
Mm.
I had a number of successes. First with Quartus Corporation, others right out of the box back in 1991 to three time frame. And I worked more or less as a lone practitioner until about 2002. At which time, I published my first article in Harvard Business Review, and that things really kicked off. But I read the book, Clayton Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma, back in the 1997 timeframe, and thought this is a pretty good solution for the innovator's dilemma. And I contacted Clay, and he was kind enough, very kind gentleman. He was kind enough to invite me to his office, and we talked about the outcome-driven innovation process. And he was definitely intrigued with the thinking and with the notion that people buy products to execute some underlying process. That's the way I explained it. And and that we could make innovation more predictable by looking at it through that lens. We're making the process the unit of analysis, not the customer, right? So we can break it down. I showed him examples of how we did this over and over again and how we were successful. So a couple of years later, Clay's book came out, The Innovator's Solution, which mentioned outcome-driven innovation and the thinking and the approach. And prior to that, we had a conversation where he said, this people have underlying processes that try to execute really doesn't make a great story, right? What we should say is people have jobs they're trying to get done. It's the underlying job they're trying to get done. I thought, yeah, that does sound much better. And
The marketer in him, I guess, coming out with the
yeah, exactly. It was well stated. And so he included that in his book as people have a job to be done. At that point, it wasn't even really a theory. It was just a concept that people buy products to get a job done, and so you should make sure your products get jobs done better, right? Well, that was kind of it. And that's how I think about jobs theory. I think of jobs to be done as a theory, right? It's the notion that you're going to study the hole maker instead of the drill maker, right? You're going to make that the unit of analysis because people buy products to get a job done. Okay, so then you have to figure out, well, how do I apply that in practice? We know people are buying products to get jobs done. So what? Yeah, so that was really the theory. And putting the theory into practice is really what it's all about. And as you talked about different ways to think about jobs to be done, I think they went off in different directions, different approaches to applying jobs to be done. I don't think there's different views of what jobs to be done is, right? It's the notion's pretty simple. People buy products to get a job done. Let's create solutions that help them get the job done better, right? Perfect sense.
absolutely.
Now let's apply it. All right. So I think people went off in different directions in terms of how to apply it.
I think this is the piece that I definitely got stuck on. I was like, I get it, it feels right, but what do I do now? What do I do with
Right.
that theory? And
Yeah.
that's the conversation I'm really interested in hearing.
Great. Well, the interesting thing is the process came before the theory, which I was working on the process and perfecting it before Clay introduced jobs to be done as a theory. So we had a lot of practice in making it work, but putting it in practice is not easy. It requires a very different mindset shift. And in terms of the different types of applications, my application was for product innovation. That's how it started. It's the IBM story, right? How do we make sure the PC Junior is a success, not a failure, right? How can we ensure that we're creating products that we feel with a high degree of certainty will win in the market before we start developing them, not after we announce them, right? That was my goal. So my application of ODI is in the product space. Turns out that it can be used for development. It can be used for go-to-market strategy, and I can explain all that in just a little bit. Because in each case, you have a group of people who are trying to get a job done. But the first question we ask in practice is, well, which customer do we want to consider creating value for? All right, so that opens up a whole bag of worms here because many people confuse who their customers actually are. And we've organized them into three groups. There's the person who's actually using the product to get a job done. We call them the job executor. There's also the buyer of the product who may or may not be the job executor. So they're trying to get a job done as well as they purchase the product. And then there's people that support the product. Some products have to be installed and set up and maintained and disposed of and so on. That happens throughout the life cycle of the product. And you may have an installer or a contractor who's doing the installation work, so they could be a customer as well. So the very first thing is to figure out, well, who do we want to study, right? Who's the actual customer? In many cases, from the innovation standpoint, who's the customer who's trying to get the job done? It's the job executor, right? So for the purpose of innovation up front, let's start with the job executor, make sure we know how to create value for them, come up with a product concept, optimize it for the product lifecycle so it's easy to install and set up and interface with and dispose of. And then the go-to-market strategy with the buyer comes last. Let's look at the buying job of the buyer, right? to see what financial metrics they're going to use to judge the value of the product. And if you do it in that order, you're creating value at the job executor level, you then supporting it in the correct way. And if the executor wants it and it's easy to support, the buyer's going to want to buy it.
Got it. And you know what? This makes me think. So a lot of the more, I guess, more nascent, newer thinking around, particularly around product-led growth, and a lot of people really focusing on software product-led growth. And this is exactly what people are talking about with product-led growth now. That you shouldn't be focusing on the buyer. And previously with software sales, a lot of particularly in marketing and sales, they'll be thinking about the buyer. They'll be tailoring things to the buyer. But actually with product-led growth, it's much more about, I guess, the job executor. It's the people that are going to be using the software to get their job done. And so it's almost like that thing that I think of as quite a new concept, and many people might think of as a new concept, actually you've been doing for the last 20, 30 years. And it's that point of difference of really focusing on the job executor first, but notwithstanding that there are many other customers that you need to be creating things for, and making sure you focus on at certain points as well. Super interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there are other customers, they need to be considered. But if you don't have a product concept that helps the job executor get the job done significantly better, then you're wasting your time with the rest of the stuff. So you got to get that part right. That's our key learning. And in most of the engagements we work on with clients, that's where we start. Make sure you got a
Got it.
great product. Make sure it's easy to support. And the buyer's going to want to buy it because it's going to get the job done better and potentially cheaper than existing solutions, which are the main criteria buyers use to make the buying decision. So,
Got it. And so step one, then, if we kind of break it down into these steps, if step one is about, which customer are we really focusing on, who is the job executor, presumably you'll be trying to find out as much as you can about those people. What are the specific challenges that they might be facing? I guess if there's a next step, or is there more about that gives you a rich tapestry or a rich kind of intelligence about who those people are, the discovery phase, or whatever you would call it?
yeah. So, we identify who the job executors are. And once we identify them, the first thing we try to figure out is, well, what job is it you're trying to get done? The first question. And that's how we're going to define a market. We're not going to define the market as the drill market. We're going to define the market as a group of tradesmen who are trying to create a quarter-inch hole, right? And we're going to go study that job and break it down. I'll get to that in a minute. But this next step is, let's define the customer's job to be done. Now, this doesn't mean let's define the job of the product, right? Because people can buy a product for a certain reason. You can buy a kettle and talk to customers and say, why do you buy my kettle? Well, I'm trying to heat water to the right temperature. Okay. And you can stop there and say, okay, let's make a better kettle. Let's make it so you can get the water to the right temperature very quickly. It stays there, it doesn't deviate, and as soon as you pull the plug, it returns to its normal room temperature. That'd be great. But it's missing the big picture, because what you failed to do there is to say, even though you're using my product to get that job done, you may be using other products in conjunction with my product. And if you are, what's the ultimate job you're trying to get done? And this is what Nespresso and Keurig and others identified. It's like, well, I'm trying to create a hot beverage for consumption. That's the job I'm trying to get done. And as a part of that, I have to heat the water to the right temperature and all that. So knowing the job the customer's trying to get done is going to open your blinders to say, maybe I can get more of the job done. As the kettle maker, maybe I can help get the ingredients in the right proportions. Maybe I could do more, right? And understand what the entire job is. And what we see often is that the companies who figure out how to get the entire job done on a single platform own the space, right? That's the platform play. But
Got it.
knowing
Got it. Got it.
knowing what that entire job is critical. But the kettle maker can still make a decision and say, you know what, I'm in the kettle business, so I don't want to get beyond the kettle business. And I just want to study the job of heating the water to the right temperature. If that's what they want to do, then that's still an application of jobs to be done, but you've narrowed the focus to a place where they've limited themselves because they're claiming up front, we don't have the capability or the desire to go beyond the job our product gets done. Perfectly legitimate, but risky. Because somebody out there is going to figure out, well, that's really part of a bigger job. And all jobs, as we see, evolve. All products evolve to get more and more of the job done until someone has a solution that gets the entire job done. So you put yourself at risk with doing that, but that's the company's choice.
And is there a risk at this point, particularly if thinking about startups, of brand new companies or brand new products even? Let's not just think about startups, brand new product propositions. There's always some of the advice is to go after the smallest MVP or whatever we want to call it, the smallest part of the chain, if you like, or the smallest thing that you can create that's going to add some value. The smallest thing. And I guess the risk here of kind of thinking about the whole job, the entire job, is, does that mean there's a challenge of keeping things small enough and not getting kind of product creep or scope creep or whatever else?
Okay.
And how do you kind of reconcile those two worlds at this kind of stage, I guess, at this point
Sure.
in the process?
Yeah. Well, let's not constrain ourselves too early. Let's look at the entire job the customer's trying to get done and figure out what those steps are, what their needs are, and then which needs are unmet. Then we can pick the step or steps we want to go after, right? Don't do it blindly. Don't just assume, oh, we're going to go after this step or we're going to go satisfy these needs. How do you know those are the most unmet needs, right? You may have an MVP, but is it going to create significant new value for the customer? So we have a metric we use. We say, people aren't going to buy or switch to a different brand if the brand just gets the job done 1% better or 2% better. Nobody cares. But if it can get the job done 15% better, 20% better or more, now I'm listening, right? So what that means is you have to pick and choose your MVP, right? If you want it to actually get the job done significantly better, you have to focus on the most unmet needs. And the way to know what the most unmet needs are to follow the ODI process, which we haven't covered all in detail yet. But rather than guessing at it and hoping that you're hitting the top unmet needs, that's what ODI is all about. Let's lay out all the needs in this bigger job in priority order so you can handpick the ones that you're going to go after to get the job done significantly better. So you're not guessing, because it's not just minimally viable, it's got to be minimally acceptable as well. And if you're not hitting that 15% range, then you're really going to have a hard time driving adoption.
Again, just to kind of recap, because I think these are the points that people, that if I was listening to this and like personally, I want to know, and I'm jotting these down. I don't know, from my memory as well as making notes, but we've got this understanding the customer. Which customer are we focusing on? Who's the job executor? What are the job that they're trying to get done? Yeah. What's that entire job? So figuring out all of the parts of that job that they're trying to get done, and then from there you're trying to analyze all of the unmet needs, and then prioritize those unmet needs to identify the things where you think you can essentially create or capture value 15% better at least. You want significant step change in the quality or in the ability to be able to solve those jobs for people. Have I kind of captured everything right there? Is there anything that I've missed in that simple analysis of what you're saying so far?
Yeah, I'd say so far so good. There's one subtle nuance I would point out, and that Great. Is in this last step there, what we're trying to do is capture all the customer's needs, not unmet needs. And I say that because we don't know which are unmet, right? We just know that going from beginning to end in the job, there's needs in every step of the way. What we're going to figure out later on is which are unmet and to what degree. And needs can be unmet in two ways. They can be underserved, where they're important but not well satisfied, or they could be overserved, where they're not important but very well satisfied. Now, by looking at all those different possibilities, you can figure out where to focus to get the job done better and where to focus to get the job done more cheaply. And if your product can get the job done better and cheaper than competitors, then you win. because you appeal to every segment of the market, the overserved segments, the underserved segments. So that's what we're looking for. And it's not to say that that opportunity exists in every market, but you don't know if it does. So you want to be very careful to identify all the needs so that you can then quantify them and figure where the opportunities are.
Got it. It makes so much sense. And I saw a post of yours on LinkedIn the other day. I think it may have been a snippet from the video you did around AI and kind of ODI, the process. And we'll talk hopefully a little bit about that in a few minutes as well. But this short snippet was about, what is a customer need? So I want to ask that of you, like in your explanation, what is a customer need?
That's the $1 million question right there, Spencer. That's it. And we have so much data on this. I've been asking this question of product teams for years. In most of our webinars, we poll this, and we ask the simple question: is there agreement on your product team as to what a need is? And in 80 to 90% of the cases, the answer is no. We don't agree on what a need is. If you go out to the literature, which I've done, and look at the opinions of the top VOC practitioners around the globe, and I did this, I looked at the definitions that they use of what a customer need is. None of them agree what a need is either. There is no agreement as to what a need is. And this is why innovation is a broken process. Everyone's trying to come up with solutions that address unmet needs. Nobody's short on the solution side. Ideas are a dime a dozen. But on the needs side of the equation, there's havoc. So in most organizations, they don't agree on what a need is, what the needs are, which are unmet. And that's why they end up just coming up with ideas and testing them in the market to see if they fit, see if they gain traction. So how do you define a need? All right, so this comes back to, again, the key principle of jobs theory. People buy products to get a job done. Let's define a need as the metrics they use to measure success as they go about and get the job done. Let's bring back my manufacturing thinking. To get a job done better, that means faster, more predictably, with a better output or result. It's automation plus statistical process control plus Six Sigma, right? It's the same thinking. So what that means is these statements that come from customers that we unfortunately have to write down in words have to convey the thought of the customer in a way that's going to inform the innovator how to help them get the job done better.
Right. So can we play this out with the hot drink example? I think that's something that everyone is familiar with. We all get that. We all get the kettle. We all get the need, or we all get the entire job, I guess, right? We're looking for that hot beverage, but our measures of success of that hot beverage will be speed of getting it ready. It will be, is it hot enough? Is it good enough quality? Is the water pure enough? Is it so many other things, right? You can probably think of another 20, hundreds. I'm sure there's probably hundreds of unmet needs, or hundreds of needs, should I say, in that process.
Well, we generally find that there's anywhere between 50 and 150 needs in any given process. That's right. Even cutting wood in the straight line, 70 different outcomes. It's like, well, I didn't think it was that complicated. But,
right. And I think this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because, sorry, I'll just cut you off there. But I when I look at the example of cutting a line, and many people I think are the same here, cutting a piece of wood in a straight line, you go, well, that's the need. You just need to cut a piece of wood, right? Surely, it's that simple. But it's when you really spend the time to figure out all of those pieces that you need to put in place in order to get that done to the best quality that it can be, to be the straightest and most accurate and quickest, line, I guess. That it's all of those different elements that come together to form this bigger picture for us, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. We need to go at a very granular level. Cutting a piece of wood in a straight line sounds like the need, but that's actually the job they're trying to get done, right? So up here, that's the job. Now let's break that job down into steps. I need to plan the cut. I need to lay out the cut line. I need to initiate the cut in the right location. I have to execute that cut and make sure I stay on track. I have to approach the end of the board and make sure I don't go off track, right? And there's a whole bunch of things that happen along each of those steps. Like when I'm making the cut, I want to minimize the likelihood that debris gets thrown up in my face, or I want to minimize the likelihood that sawdust piles up on the cut line and I can't see it and I go off track. Or I want to
I'm
minimize.
laughing here because
Yeah, you've done
because
these
I'm
things.
literally I'm laughing because I'm literally on a desk that I created, I built myself, and I'm looking over here at the cuts that I made, and all it's painful hearing this, right? Because it's definitely not the best cut in the world. I'm definitely not a woodworker, but yeah, all of those little tiny
Yeah,
or seemingly tiny elements, but if you get a few of them wrong, you're not going to be successful in getting that job done really well.
that's right. And if you get a lot of the underserved outcomes done better, now you're going to have a winning product. And that's always the goal. So define the market broadly, uncover all the outcomes. Let's prioritize them next, figure out which ones are unmet, and satisfy enough outcomes to a great enough degree where you're going to get the job done 15% better or more, and hopefully 15% cheaper. And now you've got a good product.
Got it. And that's the sweet spot. The marriage there of
Yeah,
better and cheaper means that
yeah,
you're going to be appealing to both underserved and overserved markets,
that's right.
which is amazing. Yeah.
And the key is doing it at a very granular level. That's the key.
And
These
that
outcome
takes time,
statements.
right? That's a lengthy process. In fact, it reminds me of some work that I recently did with someone that I think you used to work with. I'm going to hopefully this name will resonate with you. A guy called Zach Lyons.
Oh yeah, of course I know Zach.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, I did some work with Zach a while ago, and he had done some amazing work, some jobs, a lot of jobs research, jobs maps for a financial services organization. I came in as a facilitator to facilitate a design sprint on the back of this enormous body of jobs research that had been done. Probably a very challenging design sprint because of how we were operating and everything else, but we got an amazing process. Having that front end body of research done meant that we were so better prepared for going into a collaborative, essentially a collaborative solution kind of
Yeah,
workshop or series of workshops to align and kind of and create some amazing prototypes and solutions around that design sprint. So yeah, I haven't ever been through that whole process myself, which is why this is so fascinating to me. But having seen the work that Zach did on that project, it's a mammoth task, right? Hundreds of potentially 50 to 150, as you say, outcomes, trying to prioritize them, talking to customers, doing surveys maybe to try and figure out
yeah.
which are the unmet needs perhaps as well, the highest priority ones as well. Super challenging.
Well, it is, and I think this is why a lot of companies don't do it. Right? It's hard work, and it requires a different mindset. To capture that set of 150 different outcome statements takes patience, takes know-how, takes the ability to translate what the customers are saying into those statements. Minimize the time it takes to do X, or minimize like this bad thing happening, and so on. Really, just staying disciplined and going step by step through the job and getting it done. But it doesn't have to be super hard, right?
Right.
It's just like anything else. If you practice the technique and you get good at it, uh, you know, we often get a fairly complete set of needs with a group of subject matter experts and customers in 10 hours or so. And then
Got it. Okay.
we'll validate that set of needs with a dozen more customers, people,
Sure.
before we go quantify it.
Fantastic. And that's such a big message. As I was talking there, I was thinking, it is big, it's a lot of work, but actually, as you say, it can be done in a much smaller space of time, or it doesn't have to be such an arduous task. But B, I want I've got a figure of in the 80% that Stratogen has in terms of its successful product launches. And I've seen the figure somewhere, but you'll probably know that off the top of your head. But the result of doing this work means that you have de-risked those products so much, and is so much more likely to basically have a successful product, right?
That's the whole idea, right? That's the reason I worked on this, is so there were no more PC juniors, right? Yeah, yeah. The goal is to flip the equation around, right? Instead of having ideas and hoping they win, let's only have ideas we know will win, right? And you're just stacking the odds in your favor by listing out in front of the engineers and developers and team. Here's the top 10, 15 unmet needs we need to go address to win in the market. We got to satisfy each of them to a high level of satisfaction without adding cost. Better yet, taking cost out. That's your goal. If you can come up with a solution that does that, we're going to have a winning product. And they go off and do it.
Yeah.
Even the Bosch team, when we helped them in the circular saw space, we showed them their top 15 unmet needs, and it took them less than 3 hours to come up with their solutions to satisfy all of them. And as they said, well, it's not as if these are the first time we've had these ideas. We've known about this. The problem is we've had thousands of ideas, and we have like a 10,000 idea database. We just had no idea that these were the 15 needs that we need to solve for in this combination. And that's
Got
what
it.
companies don't get, right?
Yeah.
It's You can go talk to customers and hear a whole bunch of things, but if you hear something from one customer, is that representative of 10% of the market or 80% of the market? You don't know, right? So you could randomly pick things that are going to impact 10, 20% of the market. I think you'd rather focus on the outcomes that are underserved across the entire market. We call
Right.
those high leverage opportunities. They're
Mm.
rather rare. There may only be 5 or 6 in any given market. So those are needs that are unmet across 100% of the population.
Wow.
Everybody agrees these are unmet. If you know what those are and you can solve them, that's huge, because you're going to excite the entire market with your offering.
Amazing. And it reminds me of something that I've heard Alex Osterwald has said. I don't know whether it was something that he kind of came up with himself, or something, but this idea that all ideas at the beginning look exactly the same. It's impossible to tell the good from the bad. So what you just talked about there with Bosch, they've got thousands, tens of thousands of ideas sitting. They circulate back,
Yeah.
they kind of fester for a little while. People go, oh, maybe we should do this, and then someone says, oh no, we tried that already, that doesn't work here. And then and they haven't really tried it. Probably the reality is they haven't really explored and experimented and really found what what the what the jobs are, what the outcomes are that people are really looking for, and what those real needs are. So this is the process that enables you to really understand. And I think this is where innovation, for me, what I've always seen is the most successful innovation projects, or work around this space that I've done, have been where people have gone, that's the obvious solution, that's the best, like we had this idea but we didn't know that that was the one, and we go, great, then we've done our job.
That's exactly it, right? It's getting everyone to agree on what a need is, what the needs are, and which are unmet, right? If you can
Yeah,
all agree on that, then you're going to more quickly agree on what the best solution is. And instead of debating
absolutely.
the problem, your team's debating the best solution, which is what you want them to do, right? And I think
Absolutely.
that's a huge value of the approach. There's one other aspect of this we haven't covered yet that I just want to make sure we do, and that's
Please. Yeah.
the segmentation um, methods that we use to find segments of people with different unmet needs, especially in mature markets. Uh, we work with a lot of companies that want to enter an existing market, so they have to come in and do something better or different than somebody else, right? Well, chances are they're going to have to go after a sliver of the market and get a beachhead there, establish it, and then maybe grow from there. So we're always looking for segments of people with different unmet needs. But the way we do this is we segment around the unmet needs, the actual
Right.
outcomes. We know which ones are unmet. A third of the population thinks these 3 outcomes are unmet. Another third thinks these 5 outcomes are unmet. Another third thinks these 8 outcomes are unmet. Okay, let's look at those segments and figure which one we want to go after first and in what manner in order to successfully enter the market. And this is far different than segmenting around demographics,
Hmm.
psychographics, attitudes, behaviors, because we're segmenting for the purpose of innovation, right? We want to find groups of people with different unmet needs so we can have a product designed specifically for their unmet needs. So we don't want to segment by demographics or psychographics because those are just proxies for
Right.
groups of people with different unmet needs, right? If you segment around verticals, you're saying, hey, each vertical has different sets of unmet needs. We find that to be not true in so many cases. It's kind of ridiculous. They're usually segmented by some other variable that needs to be considered. So the way we say this is, the best way to find segments of people with different unmet needs is to segment around unmet needs.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you don't agree on what a need is, what the needs are, which needs are unmet. So this approach helps you go to that next level.
Mhm.
And in many cases, that's the level you have to operate at in order to win in the market. All these startups who are trying to get into a market, if they're not figuring out the segment of the sliver of the market they should go after to establish that beachhead, it's going to be extraordinarily hard. Otherwise, they're satisfying this group a little bit, that group a little bit, this group a little bit, but no group to a great degree, a great enough degree where it's going to make a difference and they'll gain adoption.
I love that, and I've long felt that people. I'm not necessarily saying that doing things like personas or those kind of things are a completely waste of time. I think it can be a useful exercise in certain situations, but actually, a lot of what is written, a lot of what people spend their time doing is actually just not valuable. It's not meaningful in order to as a as a segmentation tool, as you say. So I absolutely agree. I think that's such an important. I'm so glad that you brought that back again and made sure that we talked about that, because I think it's something which is critical in this world as well. I'm interested because we've talked a little bit about, it's a big process, but it can be done fairly quickly, 10 hours and whatever else to kind of really understand what the entire job is and capture all of the needs and start to prioritize some of those based on the which ones are most unmet, I guess. But I'm really interested to come back to a topic that you've been talking about recently, which is about AI. And of course, it feels like we can't have a conversation on a podcast or any other without mentioning artificial intelligence in some way at the moment. But there's two particular areas that I'd like to explore if we have time. The first one being designing for AI solutions. So, innovating around AI as a kind of the end solution that people might be, working within their product. But I'm also interested to know whether that you've been thinking or exploring the notion or the possibility of integrating some AI into the process. So, is there a way that things can be automated or sped up, or and I see things happening out there, but I'm kind of interested
Yeah.
to understand a bit, Tony, if you're happy with that, to talk about things that you might be talking about, both again innovating and using ODI for AI solutions, but also AI kind of incorporating it
Yeah.
incorporating it into the process.
Yeah, let's talk about AI, building an AI solution
Mm,
first. Um, you know, it reminds me of my old days 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when digitalization came along, and it was the big thing, right? We
yeah.
got to digitalize. Digitalization, blockchain, machine learning, Internet of Things, cloud computing, they're all technologies, right? So AI isn't the first technology that's come along in the last few years, right? So we have practice at this, and it's the same thing. It's deja vu all over again. Um, just like with digitalization, we worked with Bear Crop Science back in 2010, I believe, could have been 8, somewhere in there. And we looked at the job of growing a crop. And as we looked at that entire job, in the end, we had our 150-ish outcomes, and we saw that about a third of them related to the hardware, the seeds, the pesticides, herbicides. They informed the product side of the equation. There was another third of the outcomes that focused more on service aspects and how people could help them get the job done better. But the other third related to information flow throughout the process. where the growers needed to have the right information at the right time to execute the process in the most effective manner. This became their focal point for digitalization. And we pointed this out to them before there was any such thing as digitalization. We just said there's a whole bunch of opportunities here related to information flow. And this whole thing, fast forward all these years later, is digital farming, right? It's a real thing, and it took its roots.
Quite literally took its roots.
Yeah, it took its roots. I love it. By helping customers get their job done significantly better. AI is a technology that companies can use to help people get their jobs done better. And the way to get jobs done better is to understand which outcomes are underserved that could be potentially addressed with AI, right? So we have a
Right.
number of our clients right now scouring through their old data sets of outcomes to say, okay, now that we have AI, where can we plug it in? Because it doesn't fit everywhere. It's not a one size fits all solution. It helps to make decisions. It helps in predictive models as well. So it has its applications definitely, and it has its limitations. But knowing where to focus, just like digitalization with bare crop science, go after these 50 outcomes with a software-based solution, cloud-based solution, and you're going to have a great product. The same thing's true here. Uh, Knowing what needs are unmet and then deciding if you could satisfy them better with AI technology is what's going to drive the success of AI technology.
Hmm.
So none of that's changed.
I think that's a really key point, right? I think there's so often that we fall into this trap where people, I mean, I've probably been guilty of it. I've probably been guilty of it many times in my life, to be honest, of this kind of technological determinist point of view that the new technology comes around, it's going to be the silver bullet, it's going to solve everything, everything's got to be AI in this instance. And I think it's a solution first mindset, right? And
Yeah,
rather than stick to the process works regardless of the technology. And that's what I love about this is that nothing changes just because there's a new technology, just because there's something around the corner that we don't yet know what it can do or what it's capable of. It doesn't mean that anything changes. And it reminds me of some of the, the great catastrophic failures that we've had in the past, which have been, a product searching for a problem, you know, Google Glass or something. Now we're starting to realize actually augmented and virtual reality with a problem that's solving a real problem, that there is a specific unmet need there. That's the thing that you go after. And I think that's a really important lesson for us all to always come back to. AI is great. There's so many things that you can do with it, but let's make sure we're focusing on the needs.
yeah. And I think the first attempt is people are going to apply it to the markets they're already in, right? So can we help our customers get their core jobs done better? Great application. Again, you need to understand what the needs are in the market, which are unmet and which can be satisfied with AI. And now you have your AI strategy, right? That, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I guess with regards to that and moving that on, so do you see that the process, the ODI process, or the process that people have around innovation, whether that be ODI or some other, do you see AI playing a part in that? Is there a way that we can discover, for
Yeah.
example, needs in a quicker way, in a more automated fashion, or is there a way that we can validate, the most unmet needs in a quicker way using AI? I'm not sure. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
throwing things out there, but I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are around that as well.
Yeah. Well, of course, we're looking at this and studying it and taking it very seriously. Uh, AI has to help us get our job done better. Um, I mentioned earlier, we can get a pretty decent set of customer needs in about 10 hours of interviews. And that's not a huge commitment in time, right? So the question is, can AI come up with as good a set of needs or better in less time?
15% better, 15% cheaper.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And from what we see so far, it's taken more time and it's less effective. And here's the reason. One of the lessons that we teach when we're collecting outcome statements is don't write down bad outcome statements. In other words, make sure they all follow the rules, they follow the grammatical structure, and so on. And we have our set of rules that we follow. And if you follow the rules, when you get done with an interview, you have maybe you just collected 10 or 15 outcome statements in that interview, but they're good, right? You're not going to have to go back and debate them and try to figure out what context are they in and what do they mean. It's all happening in real time. So we extract the outcome statements from customers, we write them down. They're viewing them on the screen, so they're looking as we're writing them, and they're critiquing it, and we validate with the group of people and reach consensus on, yes, that's the best statement of that need, and it represents what we're thinking. AI can't do that, right? So what AI does is it spits out as many outcome statements as you want. You can ask for 3,000; they'll give them to you. But but we don't need 3,000, right? What we need is 50 to 150 that really reflect at a granular level what the customer's trying to achieve and what they're trying to avoid as they're going about getting the job done. So as it stands right now, that part of the process, I'd say, maybe someday it will be more automated or it could be assisted, but I can't envision the day where you would just go rely on a set of needs that were just generated by AI and not go take it and put it in front of customers first before you go quantify it. Um, I don't know why you'd want to do that, right? I mean, now you're adding risk. You're just betting everything that AI model knows customers better than customers know customers. So I wouldn't run that risk. But on the other side of the equation, it's great going into AI and asking questions like, well, what is the job of a kettle? All right, they'll tell you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What might some of the steps be that you go through to prepare a hot beverage for consumption? It'll tell you. It'll tell you something. Now, is it
Right.
right? Is it mixing core functional job with consumption jobs with the buyer's decision? Yes, it's missing. It's conflating a lot of stuff currently, but I see a day where it will assist. I think it'll make the interviewer more comfortable as they begin their interviews if they do some pre-work using AI. Right? They'll learn something about the space. They'll learn the terminology that's used. They can learn some
Yeah.
basic concepts. So I think right now it's useful from that perspective.
I love that. I love that because it's a funny thing, isn't it? We as consultants or innovators or however you want to describe what we do, we're constantly moving into new industries and some of which we would have never had any experience in
Yeah.
before. I remember doing some work recently with a reinsurance company.
Oh yeah.
I had to Google what reinsurance was. I didn't know. I wasn't aware that there were companies that insure insurance companies and that these companies insure islands and billion-pound yachts and whatever it else they do, and footballers' feet. I had no idea that these things were real. I thought it was just myths. But actually, there's there's a real use case. That's something which is you,
Yeah.
as you say, the unmet need there is how can I feel more confident? How can I feel, or the outcome that I'm really looking for is confidence in that moment where I'm having a conversation with an expert, with someone that knows what this industry is about, and that I'm able to, use the right jargon, use the right language, present myself in a way where I'm credible, and I'm going to get out of that conversation the level of detail that I really need to have. And
Yeah.
so there, yeah, makes perfect sense. I love that. I'm definitely stealing that, Tony.
Well, that's good. That's good. Because interviewing is hard. It
Yeah.
requires a number of different skills. A lot of people don't feel comfortable sitting in front of customers and asking them questions. It's just kind of overwhelming. And then you have to listen to what they're saying and write down the right things and know what to write down. And it can be taxing, right? There's a lot going on there, and it takes some practice. So it's not for everybody, and this is why a lot of people want to avoid it too, right? But
Yeah.
but there's nothing like sitting there and building a relationship with 3 or 5 subject matter experts. Like these are job executors that are just really super job executors, right? Get that group together, work with them in 2-hour increments. You get to know each other. You get to work together. You get to build out the job map, build out all the outcome statements. Just work with that team to get to that point, and you're working more in a collaborative manner. It takes a lot of the edge off the interviewing process. And then once you have your set of needs, you can go validate them with different people and make sure you have a complete set. We often go globally to see if if the needs are acceptable in Germany or Brazil or whatever, and keep adding to them. So in the end, you have a set of needs that are validated across the globe, and
Mm.
now you're ready to go quantify them, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Hey, Tony, I have just caught a glimpse of the time. Completely carried away. What an amazing conversation! But I am keen not to take up too much more of your time, and also just want to start to wrap things up. This has been an incredible journey for me. Getting this level of detail, directly from the source, if you like. But I think what I would love for you to provide is, if there are people that want to find out more about jobs or about ODI, about the other work that you do, where's the best place to signpost people to get a kind of a rich understanding about the work that you've done historically and maybe the future of what you're going to be doing as well?
well, probably the best source is the free ebook and audiobook that we've been giving out for years. It can be found at jobs2bedonebook.com with hyphens everywhere. Jobs-to-be-done-book.com.
And we'll put a
Uh,
we'll put a link down below as well,
okay,
just to make sure that's really
that would
clear.
be great. So that's a great spot. And recently we released our ODI Pro. It's our innovation strategy platform that teaches you at a very granular level of detail how to do customer discovery work using ODI. So that's you can find that going to the Strategian website at strategian.com. Look for ODI Pro, or you can just Google Strategian ODI Pro.
Amazing. That is fantastic. Well, Tony, look, I want to personally thank you so much for the work that you've done in this world, in this area that I find myself occupied in now, and spending, I was going to say most of my waking hours, but it's probably my sleeping hours thinking about as well, if truth be told. But thank you for that body of work, because it's helped me become the person that I am. I think it's helped me do the work that I love to do more than anything else. So thank you for that. But also, thank you for the selflessness, the freedom that you give this. Your Jobs to Be Done book is free. It's a free download. You can listen to it free as well. I've definitely taken advantage of that, and I'd urge anybody else to do the same as well. But massive thank you for all the work that you're doing and continue to do in this space. It's truly opened my mind and my world to the art of the possible.
Spencer, I appreciate all the kind words and thanks for that. And I wish you great success.